what we do is let's go back to our student here, okay? And we've given the student a name. Right now it's just nothing, right? So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to access the value of name. And so we're going to do that using these methods. Get, set, also known as accessors, mutators is the fancy object-oriented term for it. Accessor means we can access it. We're trying to read it. We're trying to get the value of the variable. Okay? So we do this. It's very common in Java. You just write get. Now notice it's lowercase g. Get student name. Or you could just say get name. I missed something here. I forgot to make it public. There's another thing we need to do, and I'll show you in just a moment. Okay, get student name. It doesn't like it. It's because it gives me this little comment that says return type for the method is missing. Now, on a constructor, you never return anything on a constructor. Since you never return anything, you don't even have to mention whether you return something or not. But on get student name, anything other than a constructor, we have to tell it, is anything going to come out of this or not? And in the case of getting the student's name, actually, we're going to want to get their name. It's going to be a string. So we're going to write string get student name. Now watch this. It's really easy. Return name. And look, it's no longer underlined. Okay? So that is to return the name. Also, we want to be able to set the name, right? We're also going to make this public. Now, in this case, if we're going to set it, we don't actually return anything, so we're going to write void. And we're going to write set student name. Set name might be a little quicker way of doing it, but oh well. Now, we're missing something here. Okay? If we're going to change the student's name, what are we going to change it to? Now, the student class is not going to manage this. Okay? It's going to be the other class that's testing the student that's going to manage it. So we need a way of getting information from the other one. So we're going to do that by passing it the argument. We're going to pass it a string, and we're going to just call it nm for name. Okay? And then on here, we're going to say name equals nm. Okay? And we're going to keep it that simple. We're going to save our changes. And we're going to go back to our student test. Student S1. We're going to say S1 dot set student name, and we'll call him Bob, but not the chicken. And we're going to print. Oh, we missed something here. There's one other thing we need to do. Sorry about this. S1 equals new student. We have to actually run the constructor, and this is how you run the constructor. Okay? So this is actually initializing or creating our student. So it's initializing an instance of the student class right here. Now we're going to set the name. And it's not print, it's system.out.println. Watch this. Oops, I hate it when it does this. So let's go ahead and test this out and see if this works. So we create our student here, we set the student name here, and then we output the student name using the accessor method. This is a mutator method because we're mutating, we're changing the value. I know, it's a very fancy word for a very simple idea. All right, let's go ahead and run this one and see if it's correct. You just created Bob, our first student. It worked. And that's how you'll know it's working, if you got that output. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with the code for testing the student. You can pause here if you're watching the video, or you can take a look here, and let's just close the console now and hide it, minimize it. So this is our student class right here. Let's get rid of a space. So that's the code we use to create our student. Let's get rid of this space here too. And there's the full code. Okay, now that we have our student, we have a couple methods here. I want to show you something called method overload. So when you have a constructor, you can actually have different versions of the constructor. Let's say when we create a student, we want to give it a name to begin with. What we can do is we can write the constructor just like we did before. And this time, we put a different parameter in here. Before, this was parameterless. There was nothing in the parameter. We didn't need anything to run it. In this case, if we do this version, we're going to need a name for it. Oops. And then, so here, we're going to do just like we did before. Okay, only now we're going to say name equals nm. And then we're just going to copy the rest. Okay, so this is an example of a method overload. So in method overload, you can do different versions, and the difference is you have to have different parameters here for creating your object. Okay, so that's a method overload. Let's add some other methods to our remaining data. And as you may recall, we have different tests, test 1, test 2, test 3. Yet in any one of these, we are going to need to be able to set a score, and we're going to need to be able to get a score. Okay? And on either one, we have to determine what score are we changing it. Is it the first, the second, or the third? So either way, no matter how we do this, whether we are setting the score or we're getting the score, we're going to need some parameters. Okay? The first thing we're going to need to do is indicate which score it's going to be. We're going to start with the set score. Actually, we're going to start with a get score because we did a get student name before. We're going to also make it public so that we can do this outside of the class. And on the case of getting a score, we need to put the data type. In this case, it's going to be an integer. So it's int get score. Now, in our parameter here, we need to determine which score we're trying to retrieve. So we're going to give it an integer, and we're going to just give it the variable I to represent the index of our score. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a little if statement. And we're going to compare I to, and we're just going to pick 1, 2, or 3. So we're just going to put 1. We're not going to make it 0 based. Now there's only one outcome if they give it 1, and that is to change test 1 to this. I'm sorry, we're going to need to return test 1. So we do not need to actually do any curly brackets. We can just put return test 1 like so. Okay? So there's the first test. Now, notice what you see here. This method must return a result of type int. And it's saying this is a problem. There's an error. Yet I have a return statement here. Anyone want to guess as to why that still thinks it's an error? Other programming languages may put it this way. Not all of the paths this code can follow will end in a return statement. This will only return test 1 only if and only if I happens to be 1. If they give it any other value, it will not return a value. So we're going to put an else if, and we're going to put here I is equal to 2. And we're going to, if that's the case, we're going to return test 2. And then finally, and it still doesn't like it because we don't have an else statement. And on here, it's going to be else return test 3. And now we have no red underline on the get score because all of the paths of our code will result in a return statement. So that is an important thing to make sure you do.